in the position he's in. And the CIA is no friend to him. He doesn't really have doesn't have a strong support group, and I'm worried because one of the hopes was we were going to suck up the scum from the what do they call it, the
deep state.
The deep state, or the swamp. We got to drain the swamp. That's what it was. And I just don't, I just see them being a lot of Republicans who are still angry that their choice, Bush or Rubio, didn't make it, and certainly all the Democrats whose choice of Clinton didn't make it. I was going to vote for Bernie myself.
Yeah,
he was my guy. That's my politics, basically. But Trump, because he's such a renegade, because he's not going to initially kowtow to military-industrial complex. I'll give him support, and I have in the many things that I've written to expose these people that are trying to bring him down.
The other day, we saw this fascinating, I don't even know how to describe this, Sam Nunberg. Did you know him?
No, I never met him, but I talked to Roger about that yesterday. They're not friends, but on the one side, I applaud the fact that he says he's not going to honor the subpoena, and then I asked Roger, well, but why is he bringing up your name? Why is he saying, why should I show anybody my emails with Roger Stone, for example? I mean, when I heard that on the news, I looked up and I'm like, uh-oh, Roger's in trouble again.
Yeah, right.
But that's the position he's put himself in. He enjoys a good battle. I mean, he's been battling his whole life against, one of his biggest regrets is that he put so much of his energy behind Bush, which he regrets. But that is one of his few and only regrets. Besides that, he's a Nixon man, and his book about Nixon, I wrote the newest chapter on, in which vindicates Richard Nixon from all of his crimes, and it points out that the Watergate hearings and the trial itself were decked towards the left. Judge Sirica was having secret meetings with the prosecutors and with the prosecutor witnesses. They were colluding big time to bring Nixon down, and that should have if that had come out then, my father would not. It would have been a mistrial. I mean, Judge Sirica, broke the law many times by colluding with the prosecution, designing how they were going to present their case. He was supposed to do that. He became judge and jury, and my father spent almost 4 years in federal prison for Watergate, and he would not have done so.
Now, you taped a confession with your father where you confessed to being involved in the JFK assassination. How was that being received?
Well, that was I received that tape from my father back in 2005, I think. And I put it up and out there right away, YouTube, Coast to Coast, broke the news. And mainstream media, aside from 60 Minutes, mainstream media has not touched it. And 60 Minutes didn't follow through with their episode that they were going to, give me a 20-minute slot of a 60-minute show. I had already had meetings in San Francisco with some of their top guys, and they looked at all the evidence and heard the tape and did voice matching and handwriting analysis matching and all that stuff. And a month and 6 weeks later, I got a call from 60 Minutes saying, "I'm sorry to tell you, Mr. Hunt, we're not going to go with it. It's the high ups. They're just too volatile. People back then didn't really want to get behind the idea that LBJ had something to do with the assassination. It was the mafia, or the Cubans or the Russians or whoever. But now it's much more popular and much more acceptable to at least admit, or for American citizens to get their heads around the idea that LBJ had something to do with the Kennedy assassination. And I go into that in my book, Bond of Secrecy. Roger wrote a whole book, which was a New York Times bestseller, called The Man Who Killed Kennedy. And there's been a lot of other great authors. Barr McClellan is one of the earliest ones. He was a lawyer working in Johnson's legal firm. And he wrote a book about LBJ's involvement in the Kennedy assassination. So people are kind of coming around, but we are never going to get an admission of truth or guilt from any part of the government. I mean, Julius Caesar was murdered by his inner circle of senators. Jesus was betrayed and set up by his inner circle. I mean, so it doesn't really do probably hundreds of examples of people in power being sold out by their inner circle who are there supposed to protect them, or at least be truthful. And it's no different when Kennedy absolutely no different.
So your father's confession conforms with the Rogers theory that JFK was, or that LBJ was behind it?
Oh, absolutely.
Oh,
yeah.
really?
My father admitted to me that LBJ, in my father's opinion and from his knowledge, that LBJ was huge in the Kennedy assassination, knew about it beforehand, gave it the green light. I mean, after all, LBJ didn't have a lot to do with in terms of planning and that sort of thing. That was left up to the people that, like my father and the others that were part of the actual on-the-ground plan. But LBJ had to certainly give it the green light, and J. Edgar Hoover had to give it a green light, because all Hoover had to do was apprehend all the evidence in Dallas and move it to Washington, D.C., where nobody could get to do anything with it. It was just a few hours after the assassination that Hoover was already saying that that they had the one guy and stuff. And even within 2 hours, they already had Lee Harvey Oswald. And this one great thing about Oswald's girlfriend in that summer, Judith Barry Baker, who's come under a lot of criticism and a lot of examination, but she's a truthful, honest person. She's a wonderful gal. And I call her mom, and she calls me son. She's lost a lot of her family because of what she admitted about her relationship with Oswald and how Oswald was not a shooter in the JFK assassination. So she's lost her family. I've lost most of my family because me putting out the information that my father was, at the very least, aware of the plans, if not, as he called himself, a bench warmer in it. And I respect her very much for that. So, it's been an absolute struggle for all of us to get the truth out. And people go, well, why is it even important anymore? Well, because if it's not important, then what is the value of anything? I mean, you've got to draw a line somewhere. And even though 50 odd years that may have gone by, to me, it's still just as important as it was the day after it happened. Because if you let that line in the sand keep changing, then it can get much worse.
Yeah, absolutely. And I had Judith Baker on the show, and her detractors are a very angry bunch. let's just leave it at that. The people that don't like her really don't like her, and she is an elderly woman. You got to give people a break. Now, what would we find? You co-wrote this book with Roger Stone, The Bush Crime Family. What would we find in there?
Oh wow, that was really interesting for me because I had to do a tremendous amount of research, fact checking, double checking, and then a lot of reading, and then checking those facts. So I wrote the section starting with the basic history of the Bush family coming over here from Europe, and building their empire. I took that through the original Bush guy, and then of course through George Herbert Walker's father, and then through Poppy and George W. Bush, delving into, for example, the Prescott Bush's relationship with the Nazis before and during World War II, And even prior to that, in World War One, the banks, the Harriman and Bush related transactions, which were selling arms to the Germans and the Russians and anybody that they felt they could make a buck off of. The transition from the original Remington factory was actually worked building railroad ties, and they came across the coupler links between the two train compartments, and that's where all the money came from. But they weren't patriots in the sense that when Russia it was declared war on Germany, that they were just going to go ahead and continue selling arms to the enemy, and that brought about a huge issue in D.C. Trading with the Enemy Act, and they confiscated all of Prescott Bush's funds from the Harriman banking people and a lot of other banks, and especially they released to Prescott to use that money to mold his son, George Herbert Walker Bush, into presidential material, although he never really, I don't think, ran successfully for any office. He seemed to just sort of wheedle his way into places. But it's a very interesting history of a family with fingers in the pie for all kinds of maybe not illegal, but immoral, certainly. I mean, selling to the enemy and banking all the profits, colluding with the Nazis during when Auschwitz was there to mine coal for the German iron and coal production syndicate, and the Bushes and the Harrimans had a large amount of stake in those companies. I'm a little rusty with a lot of the details, but it's a fascinating book. And then I wrote the chapter, this is like a third of or more of the book that I've been thinking of. Then we did a redo on it, and I wrote the chapter on George P. Bush, the next up-and-coming Bush contender.
Yeah, what do you make of him? He's the guy that's running. He's running for office right now, right?
He's pretty much of a lightweight, Yeah. And as Jeb is, George Prescott Bush. I don't know. He was a stalker, and he in college, with his girlfriend and stuff. He broke into, tried to get into her house, her parents' house, and was arrested and all that stuff. And he was a wild party guy, but he's been involved in Florida politics now for a number of years, and kind of keeping in the background. But I think he's going to start stepping up, and I would just be very worried because obviously the faith and the Bush legacy is going to be placed on him, and they're just going to bypass Jeb because Jeb just doesn't have it. He doesn't have charisma. He doesn't have very much intelligence. Not a go-getter. He's fulfilled his role as governor of Florida in helping the get elected. So.
In your research,
George Prescott Bush.
In your research of the Bushes, did you look into that whole theory? Well, it's not even a theory. Barbara Bush's mother did live with Crowley, Aleister Crowley.
I never heard that before.
Okay.
Maybe I did. Maybe I read it somewhere, but I'm not really sure.
Oh no, there's letters. There's letters and stuff. The theory is though that they had a relationship, and if you look at pictures of the young Bush brothers in their college years, they look a lot like Crowley, man. Okay. So I don't know.
Looking like Crowley's no indictment as to anybody's personality or anything. I think Aleister Crowley was. He's been mythologized since the B666, but he was actually a marvelous poet, an adventurer, an explorer, a mountain climber, a writer, one of the premier opium and heroin addicts of his time. It was a generation where there was a lot of experimenting going on. He was definitely promiscuous and had many orgiastic sex exploits. But I think his greatest role is so that people can go, "Oh, Crowley, he was the B666." They don't really know anything else about him. I mean, he had developed his own tarot deck, and he wrote books about the Egyptians and Thoth and all this stuff. He was quite an intellectual. So I got nothing but pluses to say about Aleister Crowley. He's not a Satanist.
Yeah, we had this conversation before. Yeah, we actually had this conversation before. I recall now.
Oh, okay.
Now,